For the month of October in 2016, I worked at Party City as a seasonal job. It was pretty hectic for the Halloween season. Obviously, I got stuck with the night shifts on weekdays since I didn't have early classes. The location I worked at changed its closing hours on weeknights to 11 p.m. During the Halloween season, my shift would start usually at 5 o'clock and I'd work till close. The rush would die after 9 o'clock, and after 10 o'clock there would hardly be anyone left in the store, especially on weekday. On my shift on the day in question, I started work at what was referred to as a costume grabber. I would be told on walkie-talkie what costume and what size to grab so that I could hand it to the customer and they could try it on. After it quieted down and later on in my shift, I was told to start cleaning up the aisles, restocking and bringing stuff either up from or down to the basement. That God's hiring quickly because it was a lot of walking up and down stairs. Past 10 o'clock there were only about 4 of us still working. A girl named Maria working the cash register, Kyle cleaning aisles and stocking shelves, Ashley the supervisor for the night, and then me during the back and forth basement work. The basement was at least connected straight to the upstairs costume storage room, so it wasn't a super long walk from the basement. I took a 10-minute breather, then went to continue lugging boxes from the basement up to the costume storage room. The lights of the basement had been turned off by someone. I figured Ashley. I flipped the light switch back on and down into the basement I went. As I was lifting a box of girls' costumes, I heard something fall on the other side of the basement. Not to make you think this basement was really big, it was just one big circle full of boxes with a big shelf in the middle. I put down the box I was holding and slowly peered my head around the shelf. There was someone in a white hooded robe costume with a scary monster mask. Of course I jumped back at first, then I left saying, "You got me." Whichever of my co-workers was in the costume didn't speak, though. They just tilted their head to the side a bit as if they were still messing with me. I had a feeling it was Ashley at first, even though she would supervise some nights. She was a clown, but then I realized this person was way too tall to be Ashley, so it had to be Kyle. I tried approaching him to remove the mask. He just backed away from me, though. Then I looked down at the boots on his shoes, the dirty, heavy work boots that I knew for a fact Kyle wasn't wearing. I started getting the shivers. I went back up the stairs without running to avoid suspicion. I shut the basement door and went straight to Ashley, who was talking to Maria by the register. I asked, "Where's Kyle?" and he literally called, "What's up?" from a nearby aisle. That's when panic set in. I asked if there was anyone else working that night. She said everyone went home, so I told her someone was in the basement in a costume who didn't belong there. Kyle and Ashley came with me to the basement so I could prove it to them, but like any cliché horror scenario, whoever was down there was gone. There was a back exit in the upstairs costume room for unloading truck shipments. It was possible the intruder exited through there. Ashley sped through the security footage of the past hour and didn't see anyone enter the costume room except for me, but there wasn't a camera in the basement or the actual costume room itself to check that. Part of me felt like it was a prank and that if I went back down there I'd find the person in the costume again, but my job was my job and I had to get back down there to continue stuck in the costume room. When I got back down there, I once again picked up the box of girl costumes I originally was trying to bring up, got it to the stairs and stopped because I thought I may have heard the noise of a small plastic bag being a slightly crump. Of course I didn't want to stay down there to find out alone. I wasn't getting paid enough. My shift was almost over, so I lugged the heavy box up the stairs, dropped it in the costume room and went back to the door. We have the basement to shut off the light. Before I did, I looked down the staircase and at the bottom is that person in the white robe costume again, only this time the mask. I saw his face, his smiling face looking up at me. I slammed the door shut and ran out to Ashley and the rest screaming for help. They came as fast as they could to the costume room, but the back exit door inside was wide open, as was the basement door. This time for real, he was gone. The one camera on the outside delivery area didn't even catch him. I don't really know if that intruder managed to steal anything other than the costume he was wearing. For all I know, it could have been just one big Halloween prank, or he might have been in there looking to actually hurt someone, for all I knew. Were about 10 or 11. It was towards the end of October, and a lot of the leaves had already fallen off the trees since my property was the biggest. My friends Liam and Billy were helping me rake up the leaves on my property into a giant pile. It was a cloudy, windy day, getting a little late. The house we lived in at the time was a corner house with a huge space on the side next to the sidewalk, which ran into a short, dead-end street with only 2 houses in it, one of which owned by an old stoner couple who didn't care about anything, and across the street from that was that small disheveled house whose owner never seemed to come outside. So this allowed us to be louder and more obnoxious without worry of a lot of neighbors watching or caring. We wrestled around for probably half an hour, then we went inside after getting tired to have a snack and play video games. The 2 of them wanted to go back outside for a nighttime triple threat match in the leaves again. That's what we called our wrestling matches. We always acted like we were in the WWE. When we got back out there, it was almost completely dark, but a streetlight that stood in the dead and lit up this side of our property so he could see enough. It seemed as though there were a lot less leaves in the pile right off the bat. This time we tried wrestling a little more, but the pile just spread too far, so we had to grab the rakes and start building the pile again. Liam noticed a long, oddly shaped pile that we did notice from before. He went over to start raking it over to our main pile, but he seemed to be having trouble. He shouted, "There's something under the leaves." We came over to help him brush some of the leaves off whatever was underneath, and all of us screamed when we realized there was a grown man hiding underneath the pile. We stepped back and looked at each other and then back at him. We didn't know whether to laugh or not. Like, was he playing some kind of early Halloween prank on us? The man's face was not yet exposed. Liam and I dared Billy to go expose the man's face. He walked up to the body on the floor, slowly looked back at us, and started lightly kicking the leaves away from where the person's face would be. As he kicked, he realized the body was hollow and hard. There was no face or head. It was a fake body that someone planted. There's some kind of prank, but who placed it there? A question was quickly answered when we noticed someone hiding in my bush right behind the pile. We yelled, "We see you two!" The man hiding in the bushes, and he came out laughing, exclaiming how he got us so good. But this man was older. He looked 60, and he looked scary and gross, huge, bulging eyes, crooked teeth, and he was breathing very heavily. He said he planted that fake body there because he always watches us play in the leaves and thought it would be funny. I had creeped me out though how he said he always watches us playing the leaves. Liam tried being nice, but I thought the man was weird, so I said, "Come on guys, let's go inside," and we left the man there. I told my dad, and he went outside to check, but the man had already moved the fake body. By then we played video games the rest of the night, all having agreed that guy was a freak. My friends eventually left, and soon after I went to my room. I had my window open as usual to get a breeze into my room. I was watching TV and I heard a man's voice at my window. I jumped and looked up at the window, but I couldn't see who it was. The voice said, "I didn't mean to creep you out earlier. I live in the house across the street over there. I like watching you kids playing the leaves." I was in shock hearing a stranger's voice outside my window. I continued looking at the window, and eventually the familiar face of that freako from earlier came into view. He reached his arm under my window, pushed it up further as he attempted to climb into my window. When he realized he couldn't fit, it seemed he started to try to reach for me. I screamed for my dad and ran upstairs to his room. I tugged him out of his bed and led him to my window. The man was already gone, but I told him he lived in the house across the street in the dead end. My dad charged over to the house with me, banged on the door, but the man didn't answer, so my dad called the cops, and when they came he took me back to the house with the police. And this time with the police, the man opened the front door, and it was in fact the same man. I was too young to be able to tell, but the police and my dad picked up on it right A way that he was on something, likely crystal meth is what my dad says. I remember looking into the house from the doorway and seeing that it was an absolute pigsty. Thinking back now, it would fit the description for the home of a meth head perfectly. All those years living there, we were none the wiser that there was a creepy meth head living in that disheveled house, apparently watching my friends and I as we would play.